He was the richest man in town, untouchable and feared by all. Then one day a group of bikers arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. What happened next shattered his world in ways no money could fix. You won't believe how far one man was forced to go to survive. The sun was relentless, cutting across the city in bright, cruel streaks, turning every surface into a glare that made his eyes water. And he ran, not knowing how far he could go, only knowing that he had to move, to escape the feeling of everything collapsing at once. Designer shoes slapping against hot concrete, the smell of asphalt and exhaust thick in the air, sweat rolling down his temples, chest tight like it was being squeezed by invisible hands, and behind him, engines thundered. A pack of bikers roaring through the morning streets, leather jackets creaking, chrome flashing, tires spraying loose gravel, and he waved, arms flailing, voice raw and breaking. "Follow me! Please just follow me!" Because his father was lying in the driveway, eyes wide, hands clutching his chest, as if the heart that had ruled empires could betray him in seconds. And he dropped to his knees in the puddles left from last night's rain, water mixing with sweat and tears, sun reflecting off it into molten gold, his chest heaving so violently he thought it might split. And he realized with a sick, twisting certainty that money meant nothing here, that all the lessons of control, etiquette, power, inheritance, etiquette, and perfection were useless when someone you loved was on the edge of vanishing. That the mansion with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the lives of privilege he had been born into, were meaningless against the fragile, unrelenting reality of the human body, of mortality, of panic. And the bikers slowed, helmets tilted, chrome glinting, unsure, amused maybe curious, maybe considering the risk of stopping for a boy who looked like he was about to shatter in the middle of a public street. And he screamed at them, voice cracking with desperation. "I don't care who you are. I don't care about anything. Please, just follow me." And for a moment the world froze. The sun beating down, the city noises fading into a hum, the smell of hot asphalt sharp and overwhelming. And he felt beneath the fear, beneath the panic, beneath the sweat and tears, something he had never felt before, a strange, terrifying clarity that the life he had known, the lessons he had been taught about control, obedience, pride, legacy, perfection and silence meant nothing, that everything he had been preparing for, every moment in the mansion, every polite smile, every carefully measured word, had been preparation for this exact moment of raw, naked fear, of survival, of pleading with strangers who might be the only chance to save the man who had ruled his life with a hand so iron it had left him hollow. And as the bikers revved their engines again, the roar vibrating in his chest, he rose slowly, shaking, chest heaving, hands slick with sweat, eyes burning, sun blazing off wet concrete in painful streaks, realizing that he was not a son of money here, not an heir, not a boy hiding behind the gilded walls of privilege, but just a human exposed, desperate, utterly alive. And the absurd clarity of it made his stomach drop, and his heart surge at once, because for the first time in his life he had nothing. No protection, no advantage, no shield, only the raw, urgent truth that life could fall apart in a single heartbeat, and that sometimes the only thing standing between disaster and survival was the willingness to beg, to run, to hope that someone, anyone, would care enough to follow him. And as the engines kicked back into motion, tires skidding against the hot morning asphalt, sending tiny sprays into the air, he shouted again, a scream that cracked and broke, "Please, follow me now." And in that single, desperate plea, the city seemed to hold its breath. The sun reflected in puddles and windows and chrome, and he knew the world had changed, that life as he knew it had ended, and that from this moment on there would be no safety, no illusion of control, only the unthinkable, and the raw, frightening, thrilling human journey that had just begun. Before the morning had exploded into chaos, before the asphalt had burned against his shoes, and before the bikers had appeared like angels or predators, or something in between, life had been heavy, unbearably heavy, like a blanket soaked in water that you could never shake off. Every day the same, every corridor of the mansion echoing with footsteps, laughter that didn't reach the walls, and lessons whispered in rooms with crystal chandeliers and polished floors about how to carry yourself, how to be perfect, how to never make a sound that betrayed weakness. And he had learned all of it, memorized every rule, every posture, every word like a script. He had no choice but to follow, his father a statue of iron and influence, eyes always measuring, hands always shaping, voice always reminding him that everything had a price, even silence, and he had swallowed whole the idea that love was conditional, that mistakes could ruin empires, that showing fear was like confessing guilt, and his mother, poised and distant, had offered only glimpses of tenderness filtered through elegance, a life where emotion was a commodity, where smiles were polished for effect. And in that world he had grown up small, careful, invisible beneath the weight of expectation, knowing he was loved in theory, in idea, in image, but never fully in the messy human way that made life real, and he had carried it all like armor, stiff and suffocating, hiding every trembling hand, every quiet panic, every thought that questioned if he was enough. And yet beneath the marble floors, behind the mirrored walls, in the rooms where the sun never truly reached, he had always felt the pressure building, a quiet storm he was told to ignore, to control, to master, but never to acknowledge. And on that morning, when the driveway turned into disaster, when the man who had ruled his life with a fist of steel crumpled like paper against mortality, all of it, every ounce of preparation, every lesson, every forced composure had dissolved instantly into nothing, leaving him exposed to the raw, unfiltered weight of reality, the kind that no amount of money, no titles, no privilege could ever soften. And as he dropped to his knees, chest heaving, sunlight bouncing off the concrete and reflecting in his tear-filled eyes, he understood what it truly meant to carry a burden, not the kind you could lift with your hands or shield with wealth, but the kind that sank into your bones, made your heart tremble, and demanded that you act, demanded that you face the fragility of life itself. And the bikers behind him, leather cracking, engines idling like low drums, were now part of that burden too. Strangers whose presence pressed into his world, whose decision to follow or not could tilt the balance between despair and hope. And he felt the strange, unbearable weight of responsibility, not just for his father, but for himself, for the life he had never really lived, for the person he had hidden beneath expectation and fear, for the truth he had been too afraid to speak. The first real understanding that the armor of privilege had never protected him from reality, from grief, from mortality, from the raw force of a moment when every life lesson collided with panic, desperation, and the need to survive. And as he scrambled to his feet, muscles shaking, lungs burning, eyes locked on the street ahead, he realized that this weight, though crushing, was also strangely clarifying, stripping away every pretense, every lesson in perfection, every gilded expectation, leaving him with only the raw, unpolished truth of who he was, of what mattered, and of what he had to do. That life was heavy, yes, unbearably heavy, but in that weight lay the fire that would propel him forward, into the unknown, into danger, into the unthinkable. And as the sun climbed higher, baking the concrete, illuminating every terrified, desperate detail of the day, he understood that he had never truly been alive until this very moment, and that carrying the weight of reality, of fear, of love and loss, was the first step toward becoming more than a boy hiding behind walls, more than a son defined by wealth, more than a shadow in the life he had been given. And with a deep, shuddering breath, he braced himself, ready to run, ready to fight, ready to follow the only lifeline that remained, the roar of engines, the uncertain mercy of strangers, and the chance to prove that even beneath the heaviest weight, he could stand, he could act, he could survive. The moment it happened, it hit him like a flash of lightning slicing through a clear sky, sudden, bright, terrifying, and the city around him blurred into streaks of concrete, sunlight and chaos, as adrenaline surged through every vein, his lungs burning, heart hammering like it wanted to break free from his chest. And the bikers, like shadows made of steel and leather, surged forward behind him, engines roaring, tires slicing through the hot morning streets, and for the first time in his life, he felt something he had never felt before, a pulse of unfiltered, raw possibility, a spark that ripped through the careful, controlled world he had known and demanded that he respond, that he move, that he fight, that he step fully into life without the safety nets of wealth, influence and preparation. And he glanced back for a second, expecting to see strangers, cold and indifferent, and instead he saw focus, precision, a strange understanding in the way they rode, a wordless acknowledgement that they had chosen to move with him, that his desperation had broken through the barrier of anonymity and demanded action, and the spark ignited something else too, the realization that fear could be a weapon, that panic could fuel clarity, that vulnerability could summon strength, that the boy he had been The sun, who had hidden behind silks and etiquette, was being shed in streaks of sweat and sunlight and asphalt. And he was becoming someone raw, someone urgent, someone alive, someone who could feel the weight of mortality and still move, still shout, still act. And as the street opened before him, long and unbroken, lined with sun-bleached walls and glowing puddles from last night's rain, he saw his reflection in a store window for a brief second, face streaked with sweat and tears, eyes wide and desperate, mouth open in a silent scream. And he barely recognized himself, but in that recognition there was freedom, because it was the first truth he had ever seen, the first proof that he was capable of something real, something unmanufactured, something unprotected by privilege. And he felt the spark grow as his father's image, the man lying in the driveway, chest heaving, life fragile, burned itself into his mind. Every second a reminder that time did not wait, that money did not matter, that everything he had been taught about control and image was meaningless against the raw mechanics of life and death. And he pushed harder, muscles screaming, chest tight, lungs ripping, as the bikers surged in perfect rhythm behind him, and for a moment it was almost beautiful. The roar of engines mixing with the screech of tires and the rhythmic pounding of his own heartbeat. A chaotic symphony that told him this was living, this was real, this was the unfiltered truth of survival. And the spark did something else too. It sharpened his mind, made every decision instantaneous, every step precise, every shout carry weight. And he realized he was not running blindly. He was running toward life, toward the fragile thread of hope that connected him to his father, that connected him to these strangers who had chosen, inexplicably, to follow him into danger. And as he veered down a narrow alley, sunlight catching the chrome on their bikes like lightning, he felt the spark ignite fully, a fire roaring through him, and he understood truly that the moment had come where the past dissolved, where expectation fell away, where every lesson of wealth and privilege collided with raw, human truth, and he was no longer a boy defined by legacy, no longer a prisoner of marble halls. He was a human being on the edge of chaos, running full into the storm. And the spark, fragile yet incandescent, had become a flame, and he would carry it, burning, through the unthinkable that waited just ahead, knowing with every fiber of his being that nothing would ever be the same again. The city felt alive, almost cruelly alive, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment to test him, to push him to the edge of everything he thought he knew. And the bikers, a pack of thunder and chrome behind him, became not just allies, but a force that pressed against the air, the asphalt, the sun-baked walls, engines roaring, tires carving the concrete as they followed his frantic lead. And he realized with a jolt that this was more than a chase, more than a desperate sprint through heat and glare. It was the collision of his two lives, the gilded, controlled world he had always inhabited, and the raw, unpolished chaos that had just shattered it. And as he darted through an intersection, weaving between cars and pedestrians, frozen in the brilliance of daylight, he saw the first real reflection of mortality, the kind you can't ignore or buy your way out of. And it hit him that his father's collapse, that single horrifying instant in the driveway, had ripped a hole through the illusion of safety that had surrounded him like glass, leaving him exposed to everything he had avoided, to every fear, every regret, every human truth he had spent years hiding from. And the collision wasn't just external, the roar of engines, the sun blazing off steel, the blur of motion. It was internal, a violent impact in his chest that made his heart skip and then hammer. A mixture of panic, fear, and adrenaline that left him gasping but focused, sharper than he had ever been. And as he rounded a corner, nearly slipping on a slick patch of oil that glimmered in the sun like spilled gold, he caught sight of the biker's leader, helmet reflecting light, and for the first time he felt the strange surge of trust, the recognition that in this chaos someone had chosen to synchronize with him, to move not for money, not for legacy, not for thrills, but because they had seen the truth in him, raw, exposed, human. And that understanding hit like a punch, a collision that left him reeling even as it steadied him, because he realized he had been running for more than life. He had been running for connection, for acknowledgement, for the proof that someone, anyone, could see him fully and respond without hesitation. And the street twisted, bright and dizzying under the unforgiving sun, his shadow and the biker's shadows stretching long and jagged across the concrete. And each step forward became a statement, a declaration that he was not the boy who had cowered in marble halls, Not the son who had obeyed rules and etiquette and silence, but a human being capable of urgent action, capable of feeling everything, capable of surviving, and the collision of past and present, of privilege and necessity, of fear and determination, pressed into him like the weight of the city itself, baking into his muscles, embedding into his skin. And as he glanced back, the bikers accelerating, engines low and dangerous, he felt the raw energy of this strange alliance, the collision of worlds, and he understood that survival depended on embracing it, on allowing chaos to merge with control, panic with clarity. And as a truck screeched to a halt in front of him, tires smoking against the heat, he darted to the side, heart pounding, the bikers slicing past, and in that split second, he understood the truth he had never been taught in the halls of wealth. Control is an illusion, safety is temporary, and life only exists in the collision of vulnerability and action. And with that understanding burning through him, chest heaving, sweat dripping, sun scorching his back, he ran forward into the unknown, the collision behind him shaping every beat of his pulse, every calculation of his steps, every breath into the moment, because he now knew that the world would never allow him to exist in pretense again, that the collision of fear and courage was the only thing keeping him alive, and he would ride it, burn with it, live through it, and never look back at the boy who had once hidden behind walls that meant nothing in the light of day. As the city stretched out under the harsh glare of the sun, he felt something he hadn't expected. Warmth, not the heat baking off the asphalt, not the sun stabbing his skin, but something deeper, something like hope threading through the chaos. And it started small, a flicker in his chest, as he realized the bikers weren't just shadows of noise behind him. They were people, real, flawed, unpredictable humans who had chosen, without question, to follow him into this unthinkable mess, and the warmth spread as he watched them maneuver through the streets with a precision and ease he couldn't comprehend. Engines rumbling like low music, tires cutting arcs in the sunlight, chrome catching every reflection, every turn, every crack in the city like a pulse, a reminder that life was still moving, that he was still moving, that even in the midst of fear, even in the heart of chaos, there could be moments of clarity, of connection, of something that felt almost like love. And it pressed against him, filling the spaces that wealth, luxury, and privilege had never reached, spaces that had been hollowed out by perfection, by expectation, by the silent rules that had kept him small and careful and unseen. And he realized that this warmth was a lesson, raw and undeniable, that people could matter, that presence could save you in ways no money ever could, that trust was something that could be given and received in an instant. And for the first time, he allowed himself to breathe without guilt, to feel without calculation, to lean into the reality that the world, while harsh and unrelenting, could also offer these improbable gifts, these moments of unexpected humanity. And he saw them, really saw them, the biker's leader, the one who had been a shadow at first, now moving beside him like a guardian, nodding once, eyes hidden but voice present, muffled but real, saying nothing yet communicating everything. And he felt the warmth spread through him like sunlight into a dark room, illuminating corners of himself he had long ignored, the boy who had been trained to hide, the son who had been polished into silence, the human who had never known that kindness could arrive in such fierce, immediate form. And he laughed, a short, broken sound that startled him, because he realized that fear could be tempered by trust, that panic could be soothed by connection, that survival wasn't only about speed or strength or strategy, it was about opening your chest and letting someone else's presence fill it. And as they rode through the streets, the city a blur of light and shadow, heat and reflection, he began to notice small things, the way a corner of chrome glinted in the sunlight, the way the wind carried the smell of hot asphalt mixed with leather and gasoline, the way each engine's pulse seemed to sync with his heartbeat. And in those tiny observations he found comfort, he found grounding, he found a reminder that life, even in the midst of terror, was still alive, still capable of beauty, still capable of warmth. And he felt it deepen when one of the bikers leaned slightly toward him at a stoplight, offering a hand, a gesture that was absurd in its simplicity but monumental in its effect. And he realized that survival was no longer just about getting through the next moment. It was about feeling it, living it, allowing it to wash through him, a fire and balm at the same time. And he rode into the open streets with that warmth glowing in his chest, a counterpoint to the fear and panic that had driven him so far. and he knew for the first time that day that this spark, this ember of trust and connection, would carry him through whatever unthinkable moments lay ahead, that it was stronger than any panic, more powerful than any danger, and that even a boy trained to hide behind walls of marble and expectation could, if he allowed himself, feel it fully, carry it forward and survive. And as the sunlight poured down, painting the city golden fire, he felt alive, truly alive. For the first time in his life, and in that warmth, he found the courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could make it through the storm without losing himself completely. The sun had climbed higher, beating down mercilessly on the streets, turning the city into a furnace of light and sound, and he ran with every fiber of himself screaming to keep up, to stay ahead, to not let the moment slip because the test had begun, the kind of test that didn't come with warnings or rules, a test that measured everything he was, everything he had buried under money and etiquette and perfect behavior. And the bikers behind him, engines growling, tires cutting sparks in the glaring daylight, were no longer just allies. They were the measure of his courage, the reflection of whether he could survive, whether he could act when fear screamed louder than reason, and every block, every corner, every alley became a trial, a gauntlet of judgment and chaos, a place where hesitation meant disaster, and split-second decisions meant life or death, and he felt the weight of it like a physical thing pressing into his shoulders, chest and spine heavy and relentless, reminding him that the world didn't bend for privilege. That money and power could not protect him from the raw consequences of choice. And the test wasn't just external, it was inside him, a crucible of everything he had been taught to hide, to suppress, to control, the panic, the doubt, the inadequacy, the terror, and he had to face it, every trembling thought and every instinct that screamed for retreat. And he did, running with his body, with his mind, with his very heart open to the fire, and as they approached a busy intersection, cars honking, pedestrians screaming, the sun reflecting off windshields like molten light, he had to decide instantly, veer left or right, risk collision or stumble behind, and he chose, and that choice alone felt monumental, defining, a test of instinct and courage. And it was in that moment, as the bikers mirrored his movement without hesitation, engines purring and roaring in perfect synchronization, that he realized the true nature of the test. It wasn't about escaping danger, it was about embracing responsibility, about stepping fully into life without shields, without illusions, without the luxury of hesitation. And every step forward, every breath he drew through lungs on fire, every pounding heartbeat, became evidence that he could survive, that he could act, that he could feel fear and hope in equal measure, and not collapse under the weight. And the city itself seemed to conspire against him, sunlight glaring, reflections dancing, heat radiating, but somehow in the chaos he found clarity, the kind that only comes when every instinct, every muscle, every nerve is tested to the brink, and the bikers' presence, their unwavering follow, became a kind of anchor, a confirmation that he wasn't alone in this, that trust and action could collide into something stronger than fear alone. And as he sprinted into a narrow side street, sunlight blinding and asphalt scorching, he felt the test morph, evolve, a challenge not just of body but of heart and mind, asking him if he could survive without falling apart, if he could lead without faltering, if he could face the unthinkable and still carry the warmth and spark he had discovered. And in that crucible of heat, speed, and unrelenting daylight, he realized that he was not the boy who had cowered behind the rules of wealth and decorum. He was something new, forged by fear and hope alike. And even as the city screamed around him, he could feel the pulse of life, the heartbeat of courage, the undeniable proof that he could endure, that the test was not a punishment but a revelation. And with each pounding step, he vowed silently that he would rise to it, that he would meet the unthinkable with the fire that had ignited in him, and that even in the brightness of day, with the world watching and chaos raging, he would survive, transform, and carry forward the lessons of fear, trust, and the raw, undeniable power of being alive. The city stretched ahead, bathed in sunlight that made every surface glint like fire, and as he ran, heart pounding, lungs burning, sweat streaming down his face, he realized something he had never allowed himself to see before. The world he had known, the life he had been born into, the mansion with its polished floors, the dinners with the perfect smiles and empty conversations, the lessons in etiquette and control and wealth. None of it had prepared him for this, for the raw, searing reality of life and death pressed against his chest like a weight he could not lift. And as the bikers followed him with a precision and coordination that seemed impossible, engines humming and roaring in perfect rhythm, he understood that they were not just chasing him, not just riding behind him, but guiding him, shaping the path he ran, offering him a strange, silent mentorship in courage and instinct. And in that realization, his mind opened, sharp and painful, as he saw the truth he had been blind to all his life. Power without humanity is meaningless. Money cannot buy love. Legacy cannot protect against mortality. And control is an illusion, fragile and fleeting. And the revelation hit him with a force that made his knees threaten to buckle, a sudden clarity in the chaos that burned through every nerve, every muscle, every beat of his heart. And he remembered his father lying in the driveway, chest heaving, eyes wide, and for the first time he truly understood what it meant to be human, to be vulnerable, to be desperate and alive all at once. And the city around him, sun-bleached streets, glinting puddles, honking cars, shouting pedestrians, seemed to reflect his inner storm, a chaotic mirror of fear and hope colliding, and he felt the weight of his own life, of all the years he had spent hiding behind silk and privilege, pressing down like a physical force, demanding that he reckon with himself, with the boy he had been, the son he had been trained to be, and the man he was becoming in the fire of daylight, running for his father, running for survival, running towards something he could not yet name but knew was vital. And as the bikers mirrored his every move, riding through the chaos with a confidence born of experience, he realized that this revelation was also a gift, that even in terror, in the face of unthinkable danger, there could be guidance, there could be trust, there could be connection, and it struck him with awe that the raw humanity of strangers, unpolished, unpredictable, fearless, could be stronger than the gilded isolation he had known all his life. And he felt it deep in his chest, warmth spreading alongside the fire of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and understanding that made him tremble with recognition. And he knew then that nothing would ever be the same again, that he could not return to the boy who hid behind wealth, the son who obeyed without question, because he had seen the truth, the unfiltered, undeniable truth that life demanded presence, demanded courage, demanded connection, demanded vulnerability, and he embraced it fully, letting it wash through him, let it shape him, and as he darted down another street, sunlight bouncing off chrome and asphalt, reflection and motion blurring into one, he realized that the revelation had changed him, that every step, every breath, every scream and plea that had brought him to this point had forged a new understanding, a new self. And even as danger loomed, even as the world threatened to collapse again at any second, he felt the strange, searing power of clarity, the knowledge that he was no longer a boy defined by legacy, by expectation, by perfection, but a human being alive in every possible sense. And he vowed silently, as sun and asphalt burned against his skin, that he would carry this revelation forward, that he would meet whatever came next, not with fear alone, but with the fierce, unshakable understanding of who he truly was and what he was capable of, and that in the blaze of daylight, with bikers at his back, and the world unfolding in chaos and light, he would never forget that the most profound truths often come in the moments you are running for your life. The sunlight had grown hotter, relentless and unforgiving, beating down on the city streets like a furnace, and he ran through it, muscles screaming, lungs on fire, sweat stinging his eyes. But something inside him had changed, something that had started as a flicker in the chaos and now roared like a wildfire, and he felt it in every nerve, every heartbeat, every pounding footfall against the asphalt, the shift that had begun in the revelation now spreading through him, turning fear into focus, panic into purpose, desperation into determination, and the bikers behind him, engines low and throbbing, leather creaking, chrome flashing in the blinding light, were no longer just allies but mirrors, reflecting his newfound clarity, their movements synchronized with his own, their presence a constant reminder that action, not hesitation, was the only path forward. And he realized that the shift was not just in the way he ran or thought, but in the way he saw the world, the way he measured risk, the way he counted moments, the way he understood life itself. That the city, with its sun-bleached streets, honking cars and shouting pedestrians, was no longer an obstacle, but a canvas on which every choice, every step, every instinct painted the raw, urgent story of survival, and he felt it deepen as he dodged a delivery truck. Tires screeching, sun bouncing off the metal, a near miss that made his stomach lurch. And in that instant, he understood that the shift meant accepting danger, accepting uncertainty, accepting that the control he had been taught to value above all else was gone, and that the only true control lay in his ability to adapt, to react, to trust himself and those who had chosen to ride with him, to carry forward the lessons of fear and warmth and revelation that had shaped him over these impossible hours. And as he ran, he felt the muscles in his legs burning, the sweat soaking through his shirt, the sunlight reflecting off puddles and chrome like molten fire. And he realized that the shift also meant embracing connection, the raw, undeniable human bond that had formed between him and the bikers, that trust and vulnerability were now part of his survival toolkit. That courage was not a solitary thing, but a network of presence and support. And the shift reached its peak as he approached a wide boulevard. Cars honking, tires skidding, the sun reflecting in windows like molten gold. And he made a decision instantly, pivoting down a side street, weaving between obstacles, heart hammering, lungs screaming, and the bikers followed perfectly, engines growling, the hum of synchronized motion like music. And in that instant, he realized the true power of the shift, that he could move through chaos with purpose, that he could make choices in fear without collapsing, that he could transform panic into action, and that this new self, forged in daylight and chaos, would carry him forward in ways the boy in the mansion could never have imagined. And as the city stretched on, bright and harsh, reflecting every beat of sweat, every rapid breath, every pulse of adrenaline, he felt a strange exhilaration, a certainty that he was no longer passive, no longer defined by inheritance, by expectation, by fear, but by action, by courage, by the raw power of embracing life in all its unpredictability. And the shift settled into him like a second skin, hard-earned and unbreakable, a force that would guide every step, every decision, every movement in the unthinkable journey still unfolding. And with it, he ran into the unknown, sun glaring, asphalt burning, engines roaring. And for the first time in his life, he felt fully alive, fully human, fully ready. The sun beat down mercilessly, casting long, jagged shadows across the city streets, and for a moment he stumbled, muscles screaming, lungs on fire, sweat blinding his eyes. And in that instant he felt it, the fall sudden and terrifying, a lapse that reminded him brutally that even with the shift, even with courage, even with the warmth of connection and the spark of revelation, life was still unforgiving, that a single misstep could undo hours of survival. And he tumbled slightly as a loose piece of pavement caught his foot, heart hammering, mind racing, and the bikers surged past him with precision, engines growling, tires carving the asphalt, moving in perfect harmony, while he struggled to regain balance. Chest heaving, legs trembling, the sun glaring down as if judging him, reflecting off windows and puddles in shards of blinding light. And in that fall he realized just how fragile he was, how precarious every decision had been, how quickly the world could shift from hope to terror, from control to chaos, and the weight of it slammed into him, heavy as the city itself, reminding him that bravery did not eliminate fear, that courage did not erase vulnerability, that every heartbeat, every step, every desperate plea to the bikers had brought him to this edge, and now the edge was real, palpable, undeniable, and he wanted to cry out, to collapse, to let it all go, but he couldn't, not now. Not when everything he had fought for teetered on the brink, and as he stumbled into a narrower street, the sunlight reflecting off the chrome of the bikers' bikes like molten fire, he felt panic surge, raw and blinding, threatening to undo the shift. The revelation, the warmth, the spark, all of it. And he remembered his father, lying helpless in the driveway, a man who had built empires and yet was powerless against mortality, and the fear of losing him, of failing, of seeing everything he had known collapse completely, made his chest tighten like iron, muscles lock, mind reel, and in that moment, he understood the true nature of the fall. It was not just physical, not just a stumble on asphalt, but the reckoning with fragility, the confrontation with limits, the reminder that even in courage there is weakness, even in trust there is danger, even in hope there is risk. And as he righted himself, lungs burning, heart hammering, eyes burning with sweat and sun, he realized he had to move through it, had to push past the terror, had to embrace vulnerability fully, because only by falling could he rise, only by confronting the edge could he understand the depth of life, the stakes of survival, the truth of connection. And the bikers, sensing the falter, slowed, turned slightly, presence unwavering, engines low and steady, a reminder that he was not alone, that even in moments of weakness there was support, that falling did not mean defeat. And he drew in a shuddering breath, letting the pain and fear and exhaustion flood through him, allowing it to shape him, to teach him, to force him into raw awareness. And as he sprinted again, balancing speed with caution, sun glaring, asphalt scorching, city alive around him, honking, shouting, reflecting every bead of sweat and tear, he felt the first pulse of resilience, the understanding that the fall was not the end, but part of the journey, that even in collapse there was growth, that even in terror there was power, and he carried it forward, every trembling step, a testament to the human ability to endure, to rise again, to survive, to fight, to love, to move through the unthinkable. And with each pulse, each breath, each pounding heartbeat, he rose, ready to meet the challenges still ahead. Sun burning, asphalt scorching, engines roaring, alive in every sense, human in every way. The city sprawled before him, sun blazing, asphalt burning, but he no longer stumbled, no longer faltered, because the fall had taught him something the mansion never could, something the polished floors and empty lessons could never whisper. And he rose with every ounce of himself, muscles taut, lungs roaring, heart hammering, and the bikers behind him mirrored the rhythm, engines humming and roaring in perfect cadence, the chrome glinting in sunlight that made every reflection, every movement, every turn feel like a pulse of life itself. And he realized that rising was not about power, not about control, not about wealth or inheritance, but about embracing the raw, messy, unpredictable force of human will, about leaning into fear and letting it sharpen every instinct, every sense, every heartbeat, about understanding that courage was a muscle that grew under pressure, under chaos, under daylight that made nothing invisible. And as he ran through the streets, weaving between cars, pedestrians frozen in astonishment, sunlight reflecting off every surface like shards of gold and fire, he felt the rise spread through him, a warmth mixed with adrenaline, a clarity that set his mind ablaze, reminding him that every step forward was a declaration, a testament that he could survive, that he could lead, that he could act when the world demanded it. And the bikers, moving like extensions of him, offered both strength and mirror, showing him that trust, connection, and unyielding will could carry a person beyond fear, beyond panic, beyond the collapse that had nearly broken him. And as he darted through a narrow alley, sunlight blinding, asphalt hot and slick, he felt the shift fully integrate into him, every fall behind him, every revelation, every spark, every warmth now forming a single coherent force, propelling him forward, reminding him that rising was not about escaping danger, but about confronting it, meeting it, mastering it through presence, through courage, through humanity. And as he surged into a wider boulevard, the city alive with sound and light, reflections dancing on windows and puddles, honking, shouting, heat shimmering off the asphalt, he realized that the rise was also about choice, the deliberate decision to move forward, to act despite fear, to embrace vulnerability as strength, to transform desperation into action. And he felt it in every fiber, every beat, every tremor of exhaustion and adrenaline, the sensation of being fully alive, fully human, fully capable, a force forged in chaos and daylight. And as the bikers flanked him, engines throbbing, tires carving the street, he understood the beauty of survival, the poetry of movement, the rhythm of life that only emerges when you meet the unthinkable and refuse to yield. And for the first time, he felt a sense of triumph that was not about wealth or inheritance or expectation, but about mastery of self, about embracing fear and letting it teach rather than break, about the raw, unfiltered joy of rising after the fall. And the sunlight, harsh and perfect, reflected off every surface, glinting off chrome, puddles, windows, a symbol of the fire he carried within, and he ran with it, every step a declaration, every breath a testament, every heartbeat a drum calling him forward, alive, human, unstoppable, rising into the unthinkable, ready to meet whatever came next with courage, clarity, and the fierce, undeniable truth that he would survive, that he would lead, that he would be more than a boy defined by privilege, and that in the heat of daylight, with the city roaring around him, the bikers roaring behind him, and life exploding in motion, He had finally risen. The city had shifted around him, sun high and relentless, streets alive with noise and heat. But he moved through it with a rhythm he had earned, muscles taut, lungs burning, heart hammering, each step a testament to the lessons of the day, to the fire that had been lit within him and the bikers behind him, engines humming and roaring in perfect unison, had become more than allies. They were witnesses, reflections, companions, proof that trust, when chosen and honored, could lift a person from fear into action. And as he approached the driveway where the chaos had begun, where his father had lain crumpled like fragile paper, he felt a strange mixture of dread and clarity, the weight of the past hours pressing into him, the realization that the return would not be simple, that life had changed in ways he could not unsee or undo. And yet within that heaviness there was a pulse of triumph, a current of understanding that he had been tested, had fallen, had risen, and had been transformed. And as the bikers flanked him, engines throbbing, leather creaking, chrome flashing, he took in every detail: the mansion, the sun reflecting off its marble, the driveway still glinting with heat and memory, the subtle chaos of servants frozen in mid-task, eyes wide at the improbable sight of strangers on motorcycles moving with uncanny synchronization. And he realized that the return was not simply a physical act, it was a reckoning, a confrontation with the past, a step into a new understanding of life, privilege, courage, and love. And he felt the lessons of the spark, the collision, the warmth, the test, the revelation, and the rise coalesce into a force that propelled him forward. Chest heaving, limbs trembling, mind alive with clarity and instinct, every nerve tuned to the rhythm of the world. And as he stopped just short of the driveway, heart pounding like a drum in the blazing sunlight, he saw his father struggling to rise, face pale, eyes wide with recognition and fear. And in that moment, he understood that the return was not about saving the past. It was about reclaiming it, about confronting it, about moving forward with courage and presence, about acknowledging that life could change in an instant, that nothing was guaranteed, and that every action, every choice, every step carried weight, significance and consequence. And he stepped forward, chest heaving, voice raw and steady, calling out to his father, to the bikers, to the city itself, and felt the strange, warming truth of connection, of shared struggle, of humanity, of presence. And the sunlight beat down, reflecting off chrome puddles, windows, the heat shimmering in waves across asphalt. But he no longer felt crushed by it, no longer afraid of it, no longer bound by the boy he had been, because the return had changed him, had shaped him, had forced him to see that life required courage, demanded honesty, rewarded risk. And in that blazing light, with bikers behind him, father before him, city alive around him, he understood the power of the human heart, the resilience of trust, the unthinkable beauty of action in the face of fear. And he smiled, not with ease, not with relief, but with the fierce, raw understanding that he had returned as someone new, someone alive, someone fully human, fully present, fully ready for whatever came next. And the roar of engines, the heat of sunlight, the pulse of life in the city, all seemed to echo his own heartbeat, triumphant, unbroken, and utterly alive. The city had quieted just enough for him to feel it. The echo of everything that had happened that day, the roar of engines, the pounding of his heart, the heat of sunlight on asphalt, the tension of fear and the warmth of connection, all reverberating in his chest like a drumbeat that refused to stop. And as he stood at the edge of the driveway, father before him, bikers behind him, sunlight blazing off chrome and concrete, he realized that the echo was more than sound. It was memory. It was lesson. It was the imprint of survival and courage, a resonance that would linger long after the engines faded, after the heat dissipated, after the city returned to its ordinary rhythm. And he understood that life would never be the same, that the boy who had hidden behind wealth, behind etiquette, behind perfect smiles and measured words, no longer existed, replaced by someone forged in daylight, chaos, fear, and hope. And the echo carried with it the truth that had been hammered into him in every step, every fall, every rise, every connection, every breath of that unthinkable day. That human life, raw and fragile and unstoppable, demanded presence, demanded courage, demanded action, demanded love. And he felt it pulse through him, a vibration in his chest and spine, in his muscles and nerves, a rhythm that told him he was alive, that he mattered, that his choices, his courage, his vulnerability had shaped reality in ways he could never fully calculate. And as he looked at his father, pale but breathing, eyes wide and aware, the echo of fear mixed with relief, gratitude mingling with awe, he understood that every human connection, every act of trust, every shared moment of vulnerability was more powerful than wealth, more enduring than legacy, more transformative than any lesson in control. And he felt the bikers behind him, still engines humming, still chrome flashing in sunlight, and knew that they were part of the echo too, participants in the resonance of courage and trust, living proof that even strangers could change the trajectory of a life. And as the sunlight beat down, shadows stretching long and jagged across the driveway, puddles from earlier reflecting molten gold, he realized that the echo was not just about what had happened, but what would continue to ripple outward, invisible yet undeniable, shaping the way he would live, the way he would love, the way he would face fear, the way he would embrace connection. And he felt the weight of it, heavy and sustaining, pressing into him like a force that both grounded and liberated him. And he smiled, small and raw, chest heaving, eyes wet with sweat and tears, and the echo pulsed again, reminding him that life was more than survival, more than inheritance, more than perfection, more than rules. It was feeling, it was action, it was presence, it was courage, it was love. And he breathed in the city, sunlight burning, asphalt scorching, the world alive and humming. And he knew that from this day forward, every step, every decision, every heartbeat would carry the echo of courage and survival, of warmth and trust, of fear transformed into action, and that even when he returned to the mansion, to wealth, to legacy, the echo would remain, a pulse beneath the surface, a reminder that the unthinkable had been faced, that he had run through it, that he had fallen and risen, that he had discovered life in its rawest, most human form, and that nothing could ever erase the power of that day, the fire it had lit inside him, or the enduring resonance of courage, love, and survival that would echo in him forever, through every street, every sunlit alley, every breath, every pulse, every choice. And as he finally exhaled, chest tight, eyes blazing, sun blazing, asphalt scorching, engines humming behind him, he felt the echo settle into the very core of himself, a constant, unshakable reminder that he was alive, human, transformed, and unstoppable. If this story got your heart racing, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. It's always amazing to see this reach people all over the world. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing and turning on the bell so you won't miss tomorrow's adventure. It is going to be even more unbelievable, emotional, and full of twists. Thanks for being here, and remember, the next story is just around the corner. You won't want to miss it.